Hello and welcome to the Blessings in the Streets podcast. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts, and in studio with me today, I have a treat for you. This brother I met, had the pleasure of meeting about a year ago, literally about a year ago. And from the moment that we met, he was just very encouraging, inspiring. He actually invited me to be on his nationally syndicated talk show, radio talk show, the Maymi show. It was a wonderful time that I had with him. This brother is also a 10-time author. His latest release is The 10 Toxic Traits That Keep You Broke, Busted, and Disgusted. He is a speaker. He is a trainer. He is a bodybuilder. He is a man of God, a husband, a father. The list goes on and on and on. But most importantly, this is a man who is on a mission to impact the lives of many. And he's taken time out of his busy schedule to be with us today to share a little bit about his journey and letting you know how it all came to being. Because, of course, we know that it all didn't just happen overnight. There was a journey. There was a process. And it is his hope that in sharing this story, he'll be able to impact, inspire, encourage, and uplift those who have an opportunity to listen to today's episode. So without any further delay, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you Mr. J. Maymi. Jay, thank you so much for being on the show.
My brother, it's an honor and a pleasure to be on your program, and I have to give you tremendous props. You're just taking this whole podcast platform by storm. You're doing it the way it's supposed to get done, so I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, man. And again, you are a great model. I know you do the radio talk show host thing, and I had a chance to, whether you realize it or not, I was paying attention to some of the things that you were doing, kind of taking it all in, taking some mental notes. And, so you were definitely an inspiration as I thought about going on this journey of doing a podcast as to whether this was something that I could actually pull off. So I appreciate just your example of greatness and excellence in that regard on the various platforms that you're on. So thank you so much, my brother. So we're going to just go ahead. We're going to go ahead and jump right in. What I'd like to do is, if you would, tell the audience a little bit about yourself. And we want to kind of go back to the beginnings, the childhood. Kind of tell us, what was it like for you growing up, fond memories that you have, as well as if there was any particular challenges that you had to endure in that beginning part of your journey. Because you can't really tell the journey story without going back to the beginning of where it all started. So if you would, please share that with us.
Well, one of the things I can tell you that right from the get-go, the story begins where me and my brother, which I have a twin brother, where his name is Joe Maymi, and of course I'm Jay, and we grew up in Spanish Harlem in the early 70s. We're a product of adoption. Me and my brother were adopted about 3 weeks into birth. Turns out we found out that our adoptive mom was our biological mother. She was, she had drug problems. She struggled with drugs and alcoholism, and that's the reason why she had to give us up. And along came these wonderful parents who had just gotten here from Puerto Rico. They were struggling too, and my adoptive mother decided to adopt because she had already had 3 miscarriages. So trying to have another child just wasn't in the ball game, in the cards rather. So they ended up wanting to adopt, and along came us, and that's how we arrived in Spanish Harlem with a Puerto Rican family, and we were raised well, But those were in the early 70s back in Spanish Harlem. That's when you had plenty of opportunities there between Latin Kings and gang members and all sorts of issues in that community that made being poor even more difficult, because there were plenty of opportunities that you can get involved in not to be poor, right? To have money in your pocket. There's no shortage of that. So it was a challenging time early on for sure, but it was a loving home. And my parents are both gone now, and I look back and I recognize the challenges that they had, adopting kids, being financially strapped. They weren't planning on twins. They were planning on one. It wasn't until they got to the agency that they said, hey, we got a BOGO deal. Buy one, get one. And what are they going to do? They can't separate 2 brothers. So they hunkered down and believed by faith that they were going to make it. And, it was challenging times, brother, but it shaped me, I believe, who I am today, and my brother as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. And I appreciate you sharing that transparency of what it was like coming up. I've had an opportunity to know personally people who have come into adopted homes, and depending upon who you talk to, you might get a variety of different experiences, some
Mm-hmm.
good, some bad, somewhere in
Mm-hmm.
between. And clearly, it sounds like in your case, it was overall a very wonderful experience, despite maybe the financial challenges and things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I tell people all the time, because I'm like you, coming up in the '70s, and even if money was tight, there was just the way that family was set up back then for a lot of us that we didn't even know. I mean, we knew that there might be some tightness, some challenges, or whatever, but your parents were just really good about those who had that community spirit about them, that loving spirit about them, that even when it was tight, even when things were a little bit challenging, they sort of made a way in the spirit of love and caring for you to kind of keep you distracted from that and not worry about those things. It was just all about the family, just kind of sticking together and making it through even through those difficult times. So,
Mm-hmm.
and clearly you are an example of that. And I believe that, as you stated, this was the beginning of who the Maymi is that we know of today, or I should say that our audience is going to learn about today. It starts right there, just the rearing of you, and I don't think it was by accident that you ran into the parents that would come into your life and adopt you and your brother, not separate you. And even though their situations were, not ideal for that, hey, they, like I said, they took the package deal,
Mm-hmm.
and made the most of it. And that's always a wonderful testimony to hear. So thank you for sharing that.
I can give you the final version of that because that's just the beginning. The final version started about almost a year ago. I had lost my natural mom. I
Hmm.
lost her back about a year ago, and no sooner did that happen, um, Joseph, that a week later my brother connects on one of those family uh, not family programs, genealogy programs, right?
Hmm.
I forgot which one it is, Ancestry.com maybe. So all of a sudden he gets a message from, because he was on Ancestry, just trying to look around, see what our history was, and who was behind the scenes. Pops up a nephew who says, "You guys are my uncles." Well, at
Wow.
least to him, you're my uncle. And my brother was very suspect, but it was almost. I think the percentage, the accurate percentage was probably, I think, in the 70s. So it's tough to say that wasn't a legitimate person who had genealogy traits, because a 70+% probability. I mean, right? It turns out, and here's the shocker, that my biological mom was still alive,
Mm.
living in the Bronx. And about a month later, to fast forward, my brother connected with her. As soon as my mom died, a month later, we're meeting with our natural born mom, and she began to tell us the story of our other brothers and sisters. Um, and now we realize why we had to be separated from that, given up for adoption. And the way we were given up for adoption was a God thing, because my biological mother, her mother, my biological grandmother, convinced her that she should give up her twins, because she already had 5 other kids before we had, and she was only 23 years old. So she was living the streets, right?
Mm.
So, and the grandmother was raising all those kids, and the grandmother said, "Listen, I'm not interested in raising twins. You already got
Hmm.
5." She said, "Why don't you put them up for adoption? Come back a few years later when you get your act together, and then you can reclaim them." And my biological mother, trusting her mother, signed what she thought were adoption papers. They weren't. They were giving up parental rights papers.
Oh.
And she only found out about 2 years later, when she went back, cleaned up to get us, that the court said, "No, you didn't sign adoption papers. You gave away your rights to your children. You can't get them back."
Mm.
And she's carried that burden for 54 years, 52 years. And now that I find out that my other siblings, one died of AIDS, one died of suicide at 21, the other one died of drug addiction, the other one just got out of prison, and the other one is on his way out, also out of alcoholism. If I had stayed in that environment, if me and my brother
Wow.
had stayed in that environment, we probably wouldn't be any better than them.
Mm.
Yeah,
Wow.
brother, this is an ordained, orchestrated playwright.
Absolutely, absolutely, and And that's no knock against the other siblings that didn't have the outcome that you and your brother have been fortunate to have. But again, as you said, it was a God ordained thing because you're able to draw from not only your own experiences, but draw from what you were set apart from in order to
Hmm.
be what you are today. And now you're able to pour into a number of different platforms, a number of different ways into other people who might be going through some of those same struggles. It almost, and you'll get a chance to talk about it. It kind of ties back into just your latest release, about the
Right.
toxic
Right.
traits. So again, it comes full circle. I mean, even when I said at the top of the show, literally, my on my Facebook page, I want to say it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, I got the pop up memory about where I met you at the networking event. It's literally been, and here we are, you now on a show that I'm hosting.
Hmm.
After you and I talked that day, and it was just briefly, but that
Right.
day you invited me to be on yours. And so God works this stuff out for a reason. There's a plan all behind it, and again, He clearly had something in mind for you and your brother. To make your mark, and you all are doing just that, and that's just an awesome testimony, and
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
that's just I appreciate you sharing all of that. That's somebody's gonna be blessed in hearing this story, and we're just getting started with it. So
Hmm. Right.
thank you, thank you so much for that. So I want to go a little bit deeper. As we talk about our life journeys, of course, after we get past those beginnings, there comes a point in time. Sometimes it happens before we reach adulthood, but the bottom line is that you live long enough. There's going to come a moment in time when you get hit with a moment of adversity that it's just a little different. There's something that happens that even if you're normally good at working your way through challenging and difficult moments, every now and then we get hit with a thing, a situation, a circumstance that we start to question ourselves. I don't know how I'm going to get through this. This is a little bit more heavy for me. The burden, the weight of this is a little bit more intense. And, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make it. So with that said, tell us about a time when you found yourself in that very situation where you weren't sure. You were doubting. You were questioning. You were about ready to throw your hands up at it because it was bigger than you. Um, Tell us what that journey was like for you and what it took for you to ultimately break through and have your overcoming moment and coming out on the other side of that.
Boy, that's a whole other show on multiple episodes. That's the next book, man. I mean, I've had so many of those, brother. That is just it's unbelievable. So I can tell you one that pops in my. I mean, there's so many of them, man. I'll give you one. So I was a social worker and I got involved, but I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. And when my first marriage, I've been married twice, married now, but the first marriage, I had I got married quicker than I probably should have. I didn't have mentoring, didn't have guidance, didn't have nothing. And that's something we'll probably talk about later on, how important that is to have that in your life because you're a young guy, you're making good money. And I was making decent money back in my mid 20s. But I was doing everything that every other knucklehead young guy does with money and dating and so on. So I met a woman. And before you know, we got married 6 months into it. Goes to show, right? And all of a sudden, a month later, she's pregnant. And I was just starting my business. I was making good money in financial services, which I still do. But young guy, you're making all sorts of money. You're spending left and right because you make it faster than you spend it, and you think that thing is going to last. Until all of a sudden you get married, and all of a sudden you say, "Holy smokes!" And I look around, I didn't have any money saved. I spent it all. And 6 months earlier, I wasn't planning on being married 6 months later,
Right.
let alone 7 months later, looking at being dad.
Mm.
I had no money saved. And turns out that my ex-wife, she was a hairdresser and had her salon with her mother in the World Trade Center.
Mm.
And I remember going to the World Trade Center today's 9/11. We're recording this on 9/11, right?
Yes.
I remember being in those the Twin Tower. I lived in Manhattan at the time anyway. So I remember going there, picking her up. She was pregnant. I remember looking at those big. My little son was born. I was showing the big towers when I would go pick her up from work, and but we struggled immediately financially. And I think one of the greatest adversity was I didn't want to tell my wife at the time
Mm.
that the guy who she entrusted to be her pallbearer, her life pallbearer, her life partner, the father of her son, was broke and struggling because she didn't meet that guy. She met the guy driving the BMW and flashy and making money. And, there was no way I could tell a woman that was pregnant. This was in the 4 or 5 months of her being pregnant that I was broke. I remember we had our first Christmas. I got married in June of 1992, and that Christmas she was already pregnant, and I was broke. I was broke, brother, and she didn't know. I never merged bank accounts with her because I was too ashamed.
Mm.
So what did I do? I went out and got a job. A friend of mine said to me, "Hey, you better go get a job, and you can't forget this commission-based business. You need to get a regular job with health insurance because you're going to be a family. You need health insurance, all the regular stuff." And I remember getting a job. And one thing I had told myself when I stopped working for somebody else a few years earlier, getting a taste of my own entrepreneurial success, I would never get a job. You could never put me in a job. Well, I find myself interviewing at a job. I got the job. I aced the interview, and I showed up the next day. And or a few days later, and here I was going through an orientation. It was down in Midtown Manhattan, getting on the nasty, dry, hot subway, and getting my orientation tag, and I felt defeated. I felt like a loser. I felt ashamed because I had to go and give in to corporate stuff just because I had to make money and I was broke because I made all the mistakes. And I'm going to tell you something. You get to a point when you have to make a decision. You look into the abyss. It's a line from a movie. It's so true. And it's the point where you go from a sense of urgency to a state of an emergency.
Mm.
And when you get to that place, you're not the same. You can't be the same person. The same person who got you into those problems can't be the same person that solves them. So the state of an emergency forces you to change. And I'll tell you something. I remember I left that job. I was there one day. I left at lunchtime. The manager who hired me was a friend of mine. Even though I passed the interview with a supervisor, he made a good voucher for me. Brother, I got on that train at midday. Thankfully, my friend let me out early because he knew I had to go back to my office to continue to hustle for some money. I got in the car in my BMW. When I got back to the Bronx, I didn't even go upstairs. You know why? Because my pregnant wife didn't even know that I had applied for a job. As far as she knew, I was at the office selling financial products. She had no idea that I was out getting a job. I got in that because I didn't want to scare her.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to let her know we're struggling. She's having a baby. And she was a hairdresser. She would have decided to go back to cutting hair standing on her feet with the belly.
Right.
So I got in that car, and I remember I was parked not too far from the house, and I had to take a deep look inside. And I said, you know what? I ain't going down like this. I don't care what I got to do for however long I got to do it. And I went from that sense of urgency to a state of an emergency. And I got back to my car and I went to the office that I was renting. And you do things when you are at a place where not only other people rely on you, but when you're so disgusted, that kind of goes back to the book. I was broke, busted, and disgusted. It had nothing to do with money. Money too. But it was inside. I was broke. I was busted. I was disgusted with myself. That's when you get to the point where you change. And 12 months later, I had made more money than I had ever made before because everything about me changed. That's a watershed moment that day. I said, I'm never going back. I'm not a quitter. That job represented for me quitting on myself. And then, of course, facing the mistakes of foolish financial decisions up to that point. And I said, I'm never going to go through that again, brother. And that was a watershed moment. I'll never forget it. It's made me who I am today.
Wow. Wow. Again, I want to first, of course, applaud you for your transparency and sharing that. There are many men, and I'm saying men in particular because, of course, we are supposed to be the head of our homes, and as you stated, if we have families, a spouse, children, either present or on the way, we're supposed to be the ones that are taking those steps necessary to make sure that we're providing accordingly for that home. And I was really feeling as you were telling that story, I was just really connecting with that because it would have been so easy for you to, like you said, to just sort of just throw in the towel, throw your hands up, but you were convicted about that. And I didn't even take it in hearing your response that it was even about a pride thing. It was more like you assumed responsibility and you said, you know what, as you said, I'm disgusted with myself. I feel like I've emotionally, I've mentally, even spiritually let myself down because God gave me a vision to do a work. And yes, I made some mistakes, but I was ready to just not hold myself accountable for those mistakes. I was just ready to, allow myself to, go back to what I was delivered from. You were delivered from the grind of the 9 to 5 to do a great work. One of my things that I think people don't understand, and I'm pretty sure you do, there's a lot of people who can be business owners, but everybody can't be an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is a person of vision.
Correct.
And when you're a vision, that's a big thing. And it's going to take some commitment. It's going to take some consistency. It's going to take a lot of hard grinding work. And there are going to be some days that are not going to be smooth and flowing and easy going all the time. But you have to keep fighting that fight. And that's exactly what you did in that moment. Was it risky? Yes. Was it challenging? Yes. Would many on the outside looking in say, that, maybe would have ridiculed your decision? You need to go with the guaranteed stuff, the guaranteed check, the guaranteed benefits or what have you. But what made it okay for you to make the decision is that, again, you held yourself accountable. You did some self-reflection and you said, okay, this is where my mistakes were. This is what I need to do to correct it. You upped your sense of urgency. As you said, you shifted into that state of emergency. And it wasn't a desperation like I'm scared. It was I'm getting ready to get serious about what God has placed in me in terms of my vision. And you went in, you grinded it out. And as you said, 12 months later, you were able to look back and say, not only had I made more than I had ever made before, but you, even after getting out of the quote unquote, getting out of that hole in that moment, you weren't satisfied with that. You just kept building and building and building. It became a way of life for you. It became what made you be the person that you are. And I think that's an important message that, not only myself, but others who have an opportunity to listen to today's show need to grab hold to. We have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to look ourselves in the mirror and just say, and call it what it is. And if we made a mistake, okay, we make mistakes. Everybody's human. We make mistakes. But can we learn from those mistakes? Are we going to allow those mistakes to have us stuck in one spot where we just sit back and throw ourselves pity parties and, oh, woe is me, and we can't get into that. And I'm glad that you again shared a story where you didn't allow yourself to sulk. You were human enough to have that moment, but then you said, okay, now that I got that all out of my system, this is the plan. This is what I'm going to do. I got responsibilities, wife, child on the way. I'm going to make it happen, and you did. So that's a very powerful story again, and appreciate so much with you sharing that.
Thank you,
And
brother.
absolutely, absolutely. So when you find yourself, just kind of curious, when you find yourself faced with adversity, and again, whether it's something big like the story that you just shared, or even if it's just something minor, just that common annoyance that sometimes will creep on our doorstep, that we got to deal with. I'm curious to know, what is the process that you like to go through that kind of helps you to navigate through those challenging and difficult times? What is it that you like to, regiment wise, routine wise? It just kind of helps you process through such situations when they arise.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that if you've lived on this planet for anything more than 25 years, you've gone through adversity. You've gone through your fair share of challenges. That's part of the brochure of life. And now it's in the fine print in the back, but it's in the
Hmm.
brochure, right?
Right.
I think you have to develop a system that you can go to that gets you out of that place of mental muck and mire, because it could drag you down and it could take you right through a downward spiral all the way down from discouragement to disappointment to stress, anxiety, fear, worry, and ultimately you're no good to nobody if you're in a place of depression. And there's the process to get there can happen really, really quick. And I don't mean clinically depressed. I mean where you get to a place where a lot of us sometimes experience this place of hopelessness, right?
Hmm.
We've all been there. And I think the more ambitious you are, the quicker you are to arrive at that place because you have big dreams, big expectations, big anticipations. And delay sometimes can cause you to find discouragement pretty quickly when things aren't happening. So you got to have a system that allows you to get to recover. One of the things I talk about oftentimes is recovery. In fact, I wrote a blog not too long ago, and everything I do sometimes, Joseph, I do it because I'm speaking to myself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's why when people, they read my blogs, they read my books, they say, man, I feel like you wrote that for me. And because it's the real life, man. This is the real deal. We all fight the same fight. We're all walking on the same planet, right? There's no
Exactly.
dimensional interstellar walkers here. You and I walk on the same planet, right? So we're going to face the same thing. So I have a system called, when there is a fire like in Maui just happened now, or anything that's tragic, you have a system that law enforcement and first responders go through, and as a recovery, rescue and recovery, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to have that in your place as well. So when I get into a place where I'm dealing with something difficult, one of my systems of rescue and recovery myself is I remind myself.
Hmm.
Sometimes we're very quick to forget the good things you've done, the accomplishments you've had, uh, the good you've done for others that people have given you the gratitude in return for, right? And it's just something happens in the human mind that we tend to focus more on the things that don't go right as opposed to the things that do go right. So you could do 90% of the things right, 10% of the things wrong. You could have 95% positive living, 5% negative living, meaning something bad happens to you, or not the way you want for that to go. And all of a sudden, you're focusing on that 5%, and that 5% has the ability to drag you down to the Mariana Trench, right,
Mm-hmm.
down to the deep depths of the sea, where we should stay afloat on the things that are positive. So I remind myself, Jay, this ain't going right at the moment. But how many other times did things didn't go as right as you thought they were supposed to, and in the end, it all worked out? And I remind myself of the good things that I've accomplished. I remind myself of the times that I've recovered when things were going pretty sour. I remind myself of the impact and influence that I've poured into another person when I get down on myself. Sometimes when you feel like an imposter, you have to remind yourself that no, I have done some of these things that at this moment I don't feel like I'm that person, but let me scale back and look at my resume, and my resume tells a different story because I've done X, Y, Z.
Mm-hmm.
You can find yourself in a real difficult place if you don't shift your focus. Become your own personal rescue and recovery by reminding yourself that you are a person of value, that you do matter, that there are some things that you've done that have been good, not perfect, but good. And just because things ain't going right now doesn't mean they're never going to go right. And lack of evidence is not evidence of lack.
Mm.
It's just right now. Boy, if you don't have that system, at least for me, depending on the topic, right? Could be something, but it doesn't matter. And the undertone is I remind myself that I can get through it because I've done it in the past, and that helps me get to tomorrow. I tell people have a vision, have something that pulls you into tomorrow when today sucks.
Mm.
If today sucks, find something that pulls you into tomorrow.
I like that.
Otherwise, all you're going to see is today, and today ain't the whole story. It's
Mm.
just today.
That's awesome, man. I love that last piece. Find something that pulls you into tomorrow, man. When today sucks. I mean, because what you're speaking to, it's just a way of thinking. It's a way of being. It's like I'm not waiting for something wrong to happen for me to celebrate the greatness that I have within me, the greatness that God has placed in me, the gifts that He's placed. Yeah, we're gonna all have our storms. We're gonna all have our valley experience moments. But again, Think about what you've been through, what you've overcome. You're still here standing strong. If you were able to overcome those things, what makes you think that this time around is going to be any different? You know, like you said, you have to constantly remind yourself of that. Constantly remind yourself of your worth, your value, your purpose, your significance. When you have that, then you can withstand the dark days. You can withstand the dark moments. They don't get you to a point to where you just, like I said, are drowned out in, in the depths of misery and depression and anxiety and frustration, because that's a trick of the enemy. That's designed to keep you stagnant, to keep you doubting, to make you completely forget all the wonderful and great things that you've done, and how you've poured into other people and how you've changed lives. I mean, we have to, it kind of reminds us also to kind of practice what you preach. I can't be out here telling everybody else to, chin up, toughen up, fight the good fight. And then when I go through something, I'm ready to kind of crawl up into the corner somewhere. I mean, we have to remind ourselves that. And again, leave ourselves room to, for the fact that we will make mistakes sometimes. We will make bad choices. Things will happen. But again, we don't have to be stuck there. And just what you just shared with that, just speaks more into the reasons why we shouldn't allow those moments of adversity to just get the best of us. We can handle them in a much more healthy, productive, efficient, way that allows us again to just not get into that rut, not get into that stagnant mode where we're stunting our own growth, where we're blocking our own blessings. We have to go through these journey moments. If anything, these journey moments that we go through, they actually, as crazy as it sounds, I know from a worldly perspective, we have to actually learn to celebrate those moments, because it's an opportunity for us to level up our strength, our endurance, our mental, our emotional, our spiritual, all of those things. It's an opportunity. We have to quit looking at it as, oh, it's a bad day. No, it's a great opportunity for me to, again, go to that next level. And now I can be a verbal and a visual example of that to somebody else who's struggling in that area, who needs to see that strength, who needs to hear that from people like yourself, doing it the way that you do it. And they may now have hope that, okay, if he can do it, I could do it too. I mean, all I got to do is just believe that in myself. And part of that belief system is, again, reflecting on positive, reflecting on what has gone well in your life, what accomplishments you have had. So thank you again for sharing that. That's powerful stuff right there,
Thank
man.
you, brother. Thank you.
You dropping some nuggets on us this evening. So, Jay, if you had a chance to speak to the younger version of you, that Jay who almost was willing to give up. He had a wife, he had a baby on the way. He was making good money, but he wasn't always making the best decisions with that money. He was just trying to find his way. He was just kind of all over the place, but he knew that there was something special inside of him. He knew that there was something more to life that he was supposed to be pursuing, but he just wasn't sure how to quite navigate that thing at this time. If you had a chance to talk to him or to talk to somebody that may be in that very space right now, that you were in back then, what would be your words of wisdom that you would have to share for somebody in that situation?
That's another great question, because I think about those things often, and I do think about what would I tell the younger version of me if I could go into the multiverse, go find the 18-year-old Jay Maymi, and then the 25-year-old Jay Maymi, because it's two different people,
Mm-hmm.
and then the 30-year-old Jay Maymi, three different people. What would I say to them? It depends on I think whether the 18, 25, and 30 different stages of life, I would say different things. Looking back now from the experience I've had of life, but the one underlying similar undertone would be get a mentor,
Hmm.
get around somebody who can help you avoid the landmines, because there's landmines out there. Life has landmines, and we're all going to blow up at one point or another by stepping on those landmines, unless we have somebody that says, hey, don't go over, there's a landmine there. Hey, you better watch yourself on this field, because this field is loaded with landmines. You may want to go to that field over there. There's landmines, but there are a whole lot less of them, because I would have made better decisions. I would have done some things that would have gotten me a little bit more, would have added more wisdom to my life, that would have lessened or mitigated some of the bad experiences that I've had. I didn't have a mentor. My father wasn't, he was a good man, but he didn't know what being a mentor was. And he died when I was 21 anyway. So he wasn't a role model in terms of a mentor that way. And I didn't have anybody in my life. I was winging it.
Mhm.
And winging it is not a plan
Right.
unless you want chaos. You want chaos? Go ahead and wing it. But if you want order and a progressive pursuit of good, healthy things, then you have to find some people. It could be one or two or three, but get around some men that can pour wisdom into you. They don't have to be super successful people. They just have to be a little more experienced about life than you are in whatever area you want mentoring in. Because if you don't do that, you're going to make the mistakes. You're going to have the regret. You're going to look back and wish that you had made different decisions. And you, as a result, you waste time and energy and money and all sorts of things that you could have avoided just by having a mentor. So I wish I could go back and say, yeah, and by the way, here's let me give you the second point to that, if I could.
Hmm. Yes.
I never took the time to find out who I was. See, until you find out who you are, meaning who really is this person that is inhabiting this physical representation of myself on this plane. What are my likes? What are my dislikes? What am I willing to compromise? What's non-negotiable? What fascinates me? What bores me? What kind of person do I want in my life? What excites me that I'll do it for as a career if I didn't make a dime? Until you sit down and do a self-analysis where you know who you are, you're going to be a wandering generality in life.
Mm.
And wandering generalities waste a lot of time. I would go back and I would sit down, whether a mentor would have done it with me, or I wish I would have sat down and said, okay, Jay, time to get serious. Create a checklist. Let's get serious about life. What do you like? What don't you like? What would you do? What don't you want to do? Who are the kind of people? And you have a checklist because that checklist now becomes your guidepost for living. And then you wouldn't mess with this, but you would find yourself gravitating towards that. You wouldn't mess with this person because they're not part of your list. I got a list. I would do that. If I had sat down with myself, either doing that exercise, having the wisdom to have done that, or maybe somebody would have told me, hey, here's what you got to do. Man, there's so many mistakes I would have avoided and so much happier moments I would have lived, but I didn't know until way later in life. And so I feel like I would have given myself that advice years ago.
Love that. Love that. And a couple of takeaways to that. I would say, first of all, while that's very sound advice that you would have given yourself, again, I kind of go back to the, you were anointed, if you will, to go through what you're going through, just so that you can offer advice like this, whether it's in this platform, in your books, in speaking engagements, and things like that. And so, anybody that's listening to this is an opportunity for you to like you said, avoid some of those hiccups, avoid some of those landmines in the road by taking some of this advisement, some of these gems of knowledge, if you will, that Jay is sharing with us today, because it's never too late for you to right the ship. You just have to make a decision that, okay, if I haven't been doing it this way, I haven't taken that moment to do that self-assessment, this is now my opportunity to sit down, quit playing around, like you said, get serious about it. Let's make the list. Let's figure it out. I oftentimes myself have, gone back and forth with the very same question I've asked of you. I've asked of it myself. And there have been times where I said, had I done something similar to what you said, would I have been more interested in pursuing career, as I pretty much done the majority of my life, versus pursuing the calling? Because they're not going to necessarily be one and the same.
That's right.
And how much more fulfilling that might have been had I grasped the calling a little bit sooner. That doesn't mean that I hate that I went through what I went through, because just as I stated for you, I was supposed to. But there's somebody else who doesn't have to go through those bumps in the road. They can actually get it sooner and be able to be effective and a game changer in life and in the lives of many right now if they just simply take that time out to figure out what works for me. Quit, like you said, what would I do for free? That I love this so much. And it's not to say that you don't want money. We all want the bag, but do I love what I do enough to where if there was no bag for me to pick up, I would still be just as passionate and connected to it as I would if somebody were stroking me a check. So, I think you hit on some very important points that, again, these are things that if you haven't been doing that, you can apply this like right now.
Hmm.
And like you said, the mentor piece, and I know that there's some people out there, men and women. I was just actually having this conversation with some brothers just recently on another show, where I posed the question about, what if I'm that young man or that young woman who says, I don't have anybody in my life like that. And one of the responses that I got was, that's an excuse. A lot of times the very people that you need, they're right there in your community. There's some people that right now. And as you said, they don't have to be the smartest. They don't have to be, some big highfalutin person. They just have to have some type of level of life experience that's just enough to impart in you to get you to your next level, to kind of ignite that fire in you, to get you to start thinking about some things. I'm not just, even as I'm saying this, I can think about, and you probably can relate to this back in the day, especially in the 70s and 80s. You had at that time people in the community that were just that type of role model, even if they were going through their own personal struggles. The neighborhood, the neighborhood alcoholic, the neighborhood guy on the street, gang members. I'm not saying that should be your aspiration for mentors, but it would be people like that who, even in their own personal circumstances, would, if you had an opportunity to do so, they would connect with you and say, "Hey, young man, don't you be out here in these streets doing this, that, and other. You need to focus on school. You need to focus on your life. You need to do better for yourself." Even some of those people who had lost their way, they were still mindful of being able to, again, drop those little nuggets into you to give you some insight on what not to do. They were using themselves as an example, say, don't be like me. Don't do this. You have a chance. You have a chance to be great. You have a chance to do something special. So it's the same kind of concept. But, I was saying all that to say, we live in a technology age where you can Google groups that are out there, support groups and things like that. So we have to kind of get out of that. I don't know how to meet people. Making excuses, again, going back to that accountability that we talked about earlier. I got to do that self-reflection and say, okay, if I really want to make a difference for myself and in the lives of others, then I got to be deliberate. I got to be intentional in getting myself connected with people who can be of help to me. These mentors that you speak to, and they're out there. There are groups, there are people that you can connect with to make that happen for yourself. So,
Look,
thank
I
you.
gotta tell you something right now. I get probably once or twice a week on LinkedIn strangers that email me, message me on LinkedIn, not so much on Facebook, but on LinkedIn. And some of them I smell them a mile away. They got
Hmm.
an agenda. They're trying to sell something under the guise of I want to connect with you. I want to learn from you. But then there is some authentic ones that I can see that they really want mentoring. And it's almost, I find it endearing and an honor that they would reach out when they're being genuine
Hmm.
and they say, "Hey, I like what you're doing. I'm hoping that maybe we can spend some time. Can I pick your brain?" And so on and so forth. Some of them are my old alma mater. I went to Pace University in New York. So sometimes some of the Pace connections reach out to me. Um, so the point is, there's mentors out there that are willing to spend time with you, maybe not like hours and hours, but once a month, a couple of hours. You can't be shy. You got to be hungry to go
Hmm.
find a person that's going to help pour into you what you need in order to succeed. I'm teaching my daughter that right now. She's 25 years old and she's taken me up on my advice the last 6 months and she's made some incredible connections. In fact, one of the women that's on my radio show that she was one of my guests last week, super big whiz, big cheese in the technology world, like a woman who is a top ranking tech. I don't know anything about technology, but I got her on the show and I told my daughter, connect with her. Ask her if she could be a mentor. My daughter's looking to develop her technology skills. And she did. And she offered her an independent contractor gig. And so
Wow.
there's people out there that are willing to help you and you just got to seek them out. Back in the early 1990s, there was no LinkedIn, there was no internet, so there wasn't as easy as it is today to go find somebody to help you. So I believe people are without excuse today if they're looking to be mentored.
Absolutely. And again, that we're just reinforcing that. Look in the mirror, be intentional about it. You take some initiative. What's the worst thing that could happen? If you're being genuine and authentic in your approach and you reach out to the Jay Maymis of the world, or like the woman that you just spoke of, people like that. Worst thing that that happens is they say, no, not at this time. I'm too busy, whatever. But they are one of thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people that you can connect with. You just need one or two maybe that's willing to give you a little bit of their time to pour into you, and it can make all the difference in the world in you getting more clarity, I should say, about what your vision, what your purpose is in life, and how you can get started with that journey right away instead of, like you said, wasting valuable time, just assuming that tomorrow is promised, just assuming that opportunities are just going to sit around and wait for you to come about, when you feel like it, when you get ready, so that's just not how life is. And, so, again, just more nuggets that you're dropping tonight, and really do appreciate that. And we need this. We need to hear this, just, again, not just for information's sake, but just for self-check, accountability check. You've already plugged in some things in my head that I'm thinking right now, like I get off this call, I need to be, let me revisit some of this. Am I doing enough? Am I doing my part? Or have I been making some excuses over here on some things over here? Maybe making a few excuses over there. So, good stuff, man. I appreciate that. So before we let you go, I do, of course, want to have an opportunity to celebrate you, to love on you, to affirm you, brother. I know you got a lot of great things going on. Of course, the most recent thing that, of course, is on the forefront is your new book. So I would like for you, of course, to tell us a little bit more about the book, as well as anything else you got going on that we need to know, and how to connect with you, and just, again, absorb some more of that greatness that you got available for us.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that the joy of my heart is when the work that I do is appreciated. I realized my calling a few years ago is to inspire, impact, influence, instruct, and improve the lives of others for their good and the good of the world. And everything I've ever done, brother, once the curtain was pulled back and I got a chance to see who I am, everything I've ever done in my whole life lined up exactly with that. I just didn't know what it was. It was a calling to inspire, impact, influence. Think about this for a minute. People who sometimes struggle with their calling is because they don't know how to identify what that calling is. I was one of those guys. But once you identify your calling, which, by the way you identify your calling is you look at your gifts. Your gifts are always going to reveal your calling. And your calling is what gives you purpose. And once you find your purpose, that's where the thrill of life comes in, because you know that you are in alignment with why you're supposed to be here. Sometimes people, as I said earlier, are wandering generalities because they never looked at their purpose. They never examined their calling because they haven't recognized their gifts. I never took a speaking course. In fact, I'll tell you something interesting for you and your listeners. I'm a stutterer. I always had a problem stuttering when I was a kid. In fact, today, when I get too ahead of myself and I talk too fast, I stutter. I'm not supposed to be talking somewhere because I'm a stutterer, but I have a gift to talk. I have a gift to get up there in a moment's notice and come up with it. When I was in ministry, you can give me one line of scripture 2 minutes before I got on stage, and I create a full-length feature sermon out of that puppy. That's a gift. That's my calling. I never took one writing course, ever. And yet I'm on my 10th book now, and every book has been acclaimed by people that matter. People that say, no, this book is great. The reader acclaims it, and that's all I need. Right? So as is happening now with this latest book here, that's a gift. That's my calling. I'm supposed to inspire people. I'm supposed to impact the life. That's the gift, to write, to speak, to motivate, to inspire, to be entertaining. I wasn't gifted to throw a baseball 95 miles an hour. I'm not supposed to be a pitcher. That's not my calling because that's not my gift. Right? So if people just look at their gifts, what are you good at that other people have to work on? That's your gift. And that gift is for a reason. Follow that gift to where it leads you, and you'll be in perfect alignment with your purpose. So what I do today is walking in that alignment. This book, and I'm pointing down because I got my box. My box just came in yesterday of the book 10 Toxic Traits. I would love for people to go get that book because as many readers already coming back to me and telling me, Jay, I felt like you read this, you wrote this book for me because I'm struggling with one of these traits. I can't seem to get out of my own way sometimes, and I have not been able to identify why. What's the stumbling block? And you wrote it down in this book. It's a phenomenal book. It's the latest book. You can get it on Amazon. But I would encourage people to plug into my radio show because the radio show is all about the reality of life. There's no fluff in my stuff. I get down and dirty with the questions. People who come on the show, they can expect to be hit hard with some deep, thought-provoking, action-stoking questions that leave the listener with a greater understanding on what they need to do if they're going to pursue some kind of progress in an area of their life that they want to pursue a better version of themselves in. The show is quality, like your show. That's why you're having success. You got a quality show. Well, the radio show, the J Maymi Talk Show, they can go to jmaymitalkshow.com. They can listen to all the prior archives on there. We're cruising up close to 170. I do them once a week. And the show's doing phenomenal. So, and if you're in Dallas, by the way, coming up now I don't know when this show is airing, Robert, but if it turns out that it's airing before September 23rd, we're going to be doing a book signing in Richardson. I've put together a book signing event with some other celebrity authors. Dr. Fab, he's a renowned doctor, renowned author. Dr. Fab Mancini, he's going to be on the ticket. Also, Michael Gordon, who's the founder of Teladoc, he's got his new book coming out. He's a good man. So I'll be there as well signing books. If that turns out to be that you're in town and this airs before then, people can they can find the event on Eventbrite, or they can email me, jay@jmaymi.com, and I'll send them the invite. That's where those are the things I want people to pursue.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, my brother, you're doing some great work. I'm excited about your 10th book, and I know it's going to be as phenomenal as the previous 9 that you put out there. And of course, you have a wonderful talk show. As I said at the top of the show, I had a pleasure being a guest on your show. It was actually my very first radio appearance, and it was a wonderful experience. And of course, I've had a chance to listen to other episodes that you've done on your talk show. So you're doing a great thing, man. And like I said, it's not by accident. God is tapping into all of those gifts, and you're putting them on display in a number of different varieties and fashions, and you're reaching the masses, man. And that's what it's all about. Like you said, operating in your purpose. The vision is there, and you're building and building and building on that, and you're not allowing any of the the naysayers to get to you. You're not allowing any of the things that you think you're not as talented in. You mentioned about the stuttering, Moses stuttered, so you didn't use that as an excuse. I can't speak because I'm a stutterer. I never took a writing class, so I'm not going to write this book, even though the messaging in these books people are needing to hear, and they're very relatable. That's what makes you an appealing person. Again, whether it's in your talk show or in your books, is that you're relatable. Like you said, I appreciate that. Nobody wants the fluff, and I've tried to take that same approach even in my own podcast, and even when I wrote my own book, I wanted to be real. I wanted to connect with people. I wanted to meet them where they are and be as transparent and open as possible, because I think that's how you change lives. That's how you make a difference, is when you keep it real. When you let people know that, hey, I'm not perfect. I go through just like you go through. I've had my ups and downs, but I understand the big picture, and I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to keep pressing through. I'm going to keep persevering and doing that which God has called me to do. And once, as you stated, once that vision is realized, once your eyes are open and it's unlocked and you clearly see it, man, it's a beautiful thing. And it's one of those things that if you just keep going with it, you'll just be amazed at just how God will manifest that for you. And again, it'll be more spectacular and wonderful than anything that you could have ever imagined. So It's just a wonderful thing. So man, I'm so thankful that you took the time out to be with us, man, sharing a little bit backdrop about you personally. People may not get a chance to hear that about you all the time in your talks, and just the wonderful works, man. I'm celebrating that, acknowledging. I'm asking anybody that's checking out this show, please go get that book. Please attend the upcoming events if you're in the Dallas area. This episode will be airing before that date. So, so people, if you're in the area, or even if you're not in the area, but you can get here, come check this brother out. You will not be disappointed. He's got a lot to offer, a lot to pour into us, and again, he's just still scratching the surface. Even with all of the things that he's done, he's not finished just yet. So, take it all in, and so with that said, if you've enjoyed the show today, if the content has been something of value to you, I encourage you to subscribe, to share, to like, to comment. Let other people know, because just like Jay said, just like I've said, here at the Blessings in the Street podcast, what we're trying to do here is all about the empowerment. It's all about the encouraging and uplifting and inspiring people, taking our own personal journeys, our own transparencies, our own challenges and valley experiences, and just hoping that in the sharing of that story, we say something along the way that meets you where you are, that helps you to get through a challenging and difficult time, that gives you hope that you can achieve anything in life, that there's greatness within you, that you have value, that you have purpose, that you have substance. And you need to believe that. You need to own it, and you need to put it out there to the world and share it with everybody. It would be a disservice for you to keep it to yourself when God has given you such a wonderful gift to bless other people with. So with that said, here at the Blessings in the Streets podcast, this is the place where your story is your glory, where your relationships are relevant, and where your journey is your joy. I am your host, Joseph B. Roberts. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, God bless. Keep fighting that good fight. Keep persevering. Understand your worth, your value. Do that self-check. Do that self-assessment. Find out what your gift, what your purposes are, and make that thing happen. Take care.